Some people are like, yeah, I'm good, I'm not paying attention, talking about sports. So, all right, good morning, thank you guys. I just want to be respectful of time because we're going to throw a lot in an hour and a half, so I want to start and finish on time. I appreciate everyone that came that has never been here before. And my name is David, and well, welcome. What I'm going to do this morning, we've been doing a lot of them in Zoom, so it's really exciting to be in person. If you don't know, I used to, when I was very young whippersnapper, I was an economist in DC. So I learned early on what variables to look at versus the media. That's not a political comment, it doesn't matter. Fox News, MSNBC, the media's job is to sell subscriptions and views. So if they have one story that is not going to move the needle and people are just going to not click, that's not as exciting as another story or another version of the story, or just, you know, what you hear like clickbait. And so when you hear about what's going on in the market, with the economy, with the housing market, with the stock market, with inflation, if you just kind of see it as you scroll, maybe no one does that except for me, but like with social media, you just scroll and you just see something, or if you just post, realtors love to just share links. Even Facebook doesn't let any of your people see that link. That's why if you notice, if you have a picture that's yours, oh, so you had an alarm. See, like, we're good, we beat your alarm. When you see a Facebook, and you're probably wondering why he's talking about Facebook, I promise. We're gonna pull this all together. It's kind of like when you're on a plane, you get ready to lift off. There's a lot going on that you might not know about, and you're just sitting, trying to get as many phone calls in as you can, shut your alarm off and everything before you lift off. When you share a link, guys, on Facebook, no one sees it because Facebook doesn't want people to see it because it's not yours. That's probably good news, because more often than not, you're sharing a link that if you actually dug in and read, and then looked at what the source was and looked at where that was coming from, it's actually not factual. And so when you hear a lot of stories out there, what's going on in the economy, more often than not, it's what does the average person in America want to hear and read to continue hearing and reading. Does that make sense? Like, what do they need? Like, if the housing market gets too hot, then they're like, you know, is a crash coming? You know, if the stock market's too high, it's like, is it a bubble? And they protect themselves by asking questions. And so when I was in DC, like, it actually got to the point, one of the reasons I stopped doing it was, you know, the team, and I worked at one of the more reputable think tanks, Tax Foundation, what they would do is they'd say, yeah, okay, that doesn't go with our narrative. How about adding this variable or subtracting that variable? You know, if we're looking at tax policy or real estate or whatever it is. So it's kind of like if your clients are like, I'm worried the housing market's gonna crash. Like, well, no, homes in the 200 are like all in bidding wars at 47 offers. Like, yeah, but my house is 2 million. Oh yeah, that market's horrible, right? But like, you gotta be honest with them. So what I wanted to do this morning, guys, is I wanted to unpack where we came from, and then what variables will dictate what's gonna happen in the housing market in the future, looking at the past, and then how to talk with your clients, as well as your own household. Like, if you guys are thinking about buying or selling or borrowing, what's gonna happen this year and next year and beyond. And I'm not just gonna tell you guys what is going to happen, but I also wanna educate you. That's my goal. Last year, if you came to the State of the Economies, we started unpacking throughout the year, towards the end of the year. Like, I promised you mortgage rates would go up. We have our mortgage experts here, and mortgage rates are going up. I mean, they were 2.65% a year and 2 weeks ago. Christmas of 2020, they were 2.65, okay? Christmas 2021, they were over 3. 2 weeks later, they were pushing 3.75. Now, historically, I just refinanced, it went from 4 1/8 to really low. And so historically, 3.75 is still really good. And this last week, it went back down to 3.45 as of yesterday. But still, guys, 3.45 as of yesterday, 3.05 on December 23rd. Even with that bump, 3.05 to 3.45, you're like, oh, it's still in the low threes. Well, it's not, because we're experts, right? 3.45 is 0.4 more. I hope you guys get really confused. You're forced to take notes. Like, this is not like to sell like blurbs or to sell, like, I just want to give you everything I got, okay? I'm just going to pass it forward. 3.05 to 3.45 in 2 weeks, even with it going even higher, is 0.4%. 0.4 percentage points, which is like almost 15% hike. So your payment, outside of a little bit of interest and taxes, or excuse me, principal and taxes, just went up 15%, even with it going even higher. So you can show someone that it was even higher a week ago, your clients. So mortgage rates have been moving a lot. Stock market hasn't done anything. We'll talk about that in a moment. But what I want to do first, there's a lot I want to throw at you guys, is I want to go back in time. You guys remember 2005, 2006, 7, 8, and the markets all crashed? Good news, bad news. The good news is this economy is nothing like that economy. The bad news is, just like 9/11 will probably never happen again, COVID did happen, right? Like there's always going to be chaos and there's always going to be a collapse. It may not look like the last one. So the good news is we will hopefully never see another 9/11. We'll hopefully never see a 2007, 8. I say 7, 8 because depending on where in the country you are, you know, here in Charlotte, we're one of the most insulated markets because everyone's moving here. So it took us the longest to collapse. But New York City collapsed in like 2006. They were already rebounding in 2008. And so the good news is we should never see that again. The bad news is we'll see something similar because humans make all the decisions, guys. So before we dig into the numbers and the variables and help unpack what's happening so you can see where we are and where we're going, I want you guys to realize that every decision is made by humans, right? And so, like for inflation, last year we were talking about how inflation was going to go up. And a lot of people were challenging me on that because they were like, well, you know, how is inflation going to go up? I mean, people have been, there's no supply. And I was like, well, that's exactly what makes inflation go up, you know, because demand goes up. You throw in COVID and supply chain issues, there's even less supply. And so you know how inflation works, right? Inflation is when supply goes down, not only this low supply and high demand make prices go up, which is what inflation is, but when supply goes down, it pushes up demand. Some of you guys may know that already. Actually, before I was in econ school, I actually did not know that. I knew that supply and demand, low supply and high demand meant that prices went up. High supply, low demand meant that it went down. But what I didn't realize was the seesaw effect, that there were levers. I didn't realize that, and it's kind of obvious that when demand goes up, it pushes down supply. But also when supply goes up, it pushes down demand. Now, eventually, guys, you all have sellers that have not gone on the market yet. So think about that for a moment, okay? Eventually, guys, inflation can only get so high. Do you know that in 2000, we talked about how low it was. If anyone was in a state economy a year ago, we talked about how in the next year, inflation has to go through the roof because it's supposed to be 2% a year, 2 to 2.2% a year. For the longest time, it was negative. In 2009, 10, 11, 12, guys, it was negative and it was trying to get out of a hole. This last year, the consumer price index was 7.8 and the producer price index was almost 10%. And so inflation is crazy high. And so again, I want to give you guys a lot of variables and a lot of data, and then we'll unpack what that's meant in the past, what it means today, and where we're going. Fair enough? Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm just kind of like fueling the jet, getting everyone their seat, telling everyone not to move around the cabin just yet, like no drinks, no alcohol, put away your cell phone, put it on airplane mode. So inflation is the highest it's been since the 70s. That's not good. In a vacuum, it's great. You want inflation. I mean, you want to be able to see coffee go up at Starbucks and bread go up in the grocery store short term. Okay, you want that short term because that means the economy can handle it. Right? Like you don't raise the price of bread from $3.99 to $4.98 if people aren't going to still buy it at $4.98. You know, and so what's happening right now is they're testing the economy. You know, there's such low supply and they're testing that demand's exceeding supply. So that's good. Now it's overcompensated. It's too high. It needs to be about like 3.5%, 4%. It's almost 10. It's 8 to 10 depending on how, you know, if it's consumer or producer. So it's going to come back down. But along with that, the yields from 2 years to 30 years, the Treasury, we talked about this last year, and it's happening too, is that they're raising the yield curve. And they're raising the yield curve to go along with inflation. And they haven't pulled back on that yet, so they don't actually think inflation's coming back down. I think it is because it's obvious. You know, the housing market should have slowed last year, but nothing hit the market. And so it was like the Beanie Baby craze, right? It's like if the Panthers ever made the playoffs again, I know it's a big if, but if they ever did, PSLs will actually be popular again. You can get a PSL because it's Tuesday. You get a PSL, you get a PSL, Oprah style. Everyone gets a PSL. No one wants season tickets to the Panthers. But as soon as they like draft that new hot quarterback or like trade for Tom Brady for the last 2 years, they're sold out in 10 minutes. 10 minutes. We're not going to pick up an Alabama cornerback because outside of Mac Jones, Alabama doesn't show up on game day like a couple of nights ago. But so here's the thing, guys. Here's the thing. Well, here's the thing. For example, so Shannon loves Alabama. So she assumes they're always going to win. And well, Charlotte's popular. It's always going to go up. That's all absolute. That sounds nice on the surface, but it's not accurate because humans make decisions. And when they say today, you know what? I'm not going to rush to make an offer because now there's another option. Options are great for kids. They're horrible for adults. So like for kids, you're like, I try to get my boys to eat broccoli, and they're like, no, Dad, I want chocolate. I'm like, no, so okay, you can have green broccoli or red peppers. I'll take the red peppers. They think they won. Adults are like, too many options, shutting down, ADHD, like distraction, squirrel, social media, like they just don't do anything. People want what they can't have. So they can have that and you can have that, you both get what you want, nothing happens. So what happens next? Prices go down. We'll get to that in the future, because you guys are probably thinking there's no inventory. What are you talking about, David? Like there's no inventory. We'll get to that, I promise. Inflation hasn't been this high since I was born in November 1979. That's like the last time inflation was this high. So I imagine my mom spent a lot of money on diapers, because diapers are probably more then than now. And now they're finally getting back up again. So it's really expensive. But people are thinking, there's no supply of anything. And so prices just have to keep going up. And that goes along with houses. Now again, please take notes, because I'm actually not jumping all over the place. I'm just laying a foundation right now of all the different variables that will affect the housing market. This is called the state of the economy, not the state of the housing market. But a lot of these variables affect the housing market, and the housing market affects some of the other variables. So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg. So I'm unpacking the egg first, we'll get to the chicken, and then go back to the egg. Fair enough? That's how it works, right? Like one came first, and then had the other, and then from there so I don't know which one really happened first on day one, outside of God, but I don't really, so I'm just kind of unpacking all of it for you guys, okay? So people are thinking there's no supply in the housing market, there's no lumber, there's no bread, supply chain this, staffing that, so prices just keep going up. And that on the surface looks bad, but then our agents are telling their clients, yeah, but real estate goes up with inflation. It does. That's a fact I want you guys to know. If your clients are freaking out about inflation, let them know that real estate goes up with inflation. It makes sense. All the stuff that goes in that house costs more. All the commodities, which everything in the house is a commodity, right? It costs more. Staffing costs more. The land costs more. So in the short run, but you guys are all taking your time, which I really appreciate right after the new year, to be the experts. In the short run, guys, what the media is going to say, and what a lot of realtors are going to say, and even leaders in the Association of Realtors around the country are going to be like, well, housing market can't come down. I mean, if inflation's high, housing market has to stay high. In the short run, for clickbait, in a bubble, that's absolutely true. But inflation can come down as fast as a home doesn't sell. Who's been in the market long enough to see the market going all the way up, like we talked about in 5, 6, 7, 8, and then a home goes on the market for $285, sells in a bidding war for $330, and it sells in 10 minutes. So the next one goes on the market for $350, sells in the bidding war first day for $400. Next one goes on the market for $425. You know what? I'll wait a week to get $500. Next one, I don't mind waiting 3 months to get $550, and they get it. They get $560. Next one's I'm going to get $600. Nope. They sell for $510. You guys remember that? That was 2009. I don't get it. How did it just go down 12% overnight? Because it's human decision, guys. If anyone's ever had a child, your child can just change everything in a moment. If they don't want to get dressed in the morning, holy cow, my little guy, okay, it's not just me, my little guy, we will literally be screaming. I'm glad I don't live in an attached home, because we'll be have a screaming match, and if I'm you can go school naked, he's sounds good. I'm so we have to give options, I was I know that's not gonna work. But my littlest guy, the 2 boys, my littlest guy will change our whole day in a moment. That's how life is. You saw what happened with COVID, guys. If you didn't think that anything can change it on a dime, that's how life is. The fact the stock market's this high, I'm throwing a lot at you guys, but I'm promising you, it's all going to come together at the end. The stock market last year was just under 30,000 as a low, 29.8, and was just under 37,000 as a high, 36.9. Yesterday, I think it was 36.3. So the high all time in the stock market was 2 weeks ago. The low was earlier in the year. So stock market, I want you to think about some of these things as I throw all these different variables out, and we'll start pulling it together. Because first, I don't want to tell you anything, because people want to be heard, not told. You guys all know your stuff. I just want to share data, which is knowledge and experience, and then you guys can use your own discernment for wisdom. The stock market is at an all-time high. Real estate is at an all-time high. The real estate market nationally went up 18%. Now, one thing I didn't do in the state of the economies last year is talk a lot about other parts of the country and North America, which I'll do in a few minutes, which is what we need to be watching for next, just so you guys know. It's not just about Charlotte. Because another thing is realtors love to keep their heads in the sand and be no, yeah, I get it, California's gonna collapse, but everyone's moving to Charlotte. I'm okay. So if they can't sell their house in California, are they still moving to Charlotte? And oh, I never thought about it like that. See where I'm going with this? By 11:30, I want you guys to be I want to camp out here all day. I love it. And that was not a waste of my time. That was valuable. I hope everyone has takeaways, and you have someone in your life, in your own household, or someone in your sphere, past client, future client, that you can share this with knowledge and ask questions, guys. I'll have until 12 afterwards if you want any clarity. But I want you to be able to pass this forward and share the truth. Well, I saw this on CNBC, I saw this on Fox Business. Please ignore that stuff. Because to be honest, like sometimes they're calling me, and I'm deciding what to tell them. And I'm an honest person, but I'm also not perfect, like no one is. But whoever is answering these questions is deciding what to tell them, and then they're deciding if what David or Mike or Bob said, you know, even the economists with the Association of Realtors around the country, they could be the smartest people alive. But they have to be very careful in what they say, because they don't want to scare their association. And they're also not perfect. So what I'm giving you is perfect numbers. I'm going to give you analysis with perfect numbers. You can make your own decision because you're all adults and you're all experts in the field. So the stock market has never been higher than it was a couple weeks ago. Inflation hasn't been this high since like the late 70s. Literally, you heard about late 70s. It's kind of ironic, but the late 70s when inflation was really high, interest rates were. I mean, Teresa, you weren't doing loans then. You would have been like 5.
Nope, wasn't doing loans.
But interest rates were crazy high back then. Like mortgage rates were double digits, and inflation was double digits. So I want you to remember that. Mortgage rates were in the mid 2s 13 months ago. They almost hit 4 a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. They were 3 on the day before Christmas Eve. So if you don't think things can fluctuate, again, I just want to remind you on mortgage. I'm going to keep giving you more, then pulling it back in, giving you more, pull it back in. So at 11:30, you're like, okay, I have all this information, but it actually all makes sense. Mortgage rates were so low, so low. They're still really low, guys. Like mid 3s is crazy low. I had a 6% rate like 4 years ago. Like that's still crazy low. But your clients need to know that it can get to 4% next week and no one will even notice. But here's the thing. It already went from 3 to 3.75 in a week. So if it can go up 20% a week, and again, it's not 0.7 that it went up 20%. That's what you need to share. Because I hear it all the time. I hear it from my friends, I hear from clients like, yeah, but what's 0.5%? I'm like, no. 0.5 percentage points is 17%. Can you imagine making 17% in the stock market? If you made 17% of your stocks, you sell, right? So if it goes up 17%, you sell, right? The housing market went up 18% last year. When you're talking to someone that bought a $400,000 home, 18%, guys, is just under 80 grand. You can spend your whole life. I've talked to enough financial advisors to know that the average person retires with less than 80 grand to their name. You know that, Brad, from when you were a relationship banker. I mean, it's so rare for people to have any dollars. So real estate, guys, is life or death. Many of you have heard me say it before. I truly believe this. Knowing this stuff is that important. I didn't just in 2005 move here and say I'm going to forget what I learned. I mean, it's funny, that was for a season, but it was for a reason. God knew that it would be useful one day in life. I'm not going to share any links, guys. Like, don't share links from someone else that you don't know. I don't mean you can't trust them to watch your kids or walk your dog, but you can't trust them to give your clients good advice. Because a lot of people just don't know what they don't know. So I'm giving you everything that's out there. So inflation is almost 10% right now. It's 7.7% on consumer price. It's 9.7%. If inflation does not come down, in the short run, it's amazing for the housing market. I want you to know that. Like builders just keep raising prices because inflation's so high. Housing prices, sellers need to sell for more because they want to buy their next home and the next home is more expensive. Everything costs more, right? Totally makes sense. Long term, inflation is during a strong economy, and then the other shoe drops because it can't go on forever. So what happens is they're pushing the envelope, pushing the envelope. It's kind of like if you've ever been in a relationship where you're like, okay, I feel like I'm pushing the envelope. Maybe I should come home early tomorrow. Maybe I should just shut my mouth and just pick my battles. Today's not the day. I pushed far enough. It can only get so high. The yield curve has gone really high, but now the Fed is talking about kind of stalling it a little bit because, not because the economy's not strong, but because the economy is strong. What happens after the economy is strong? It stops being strong, right? Like you can only work out for so long, guys. You can be like, oh, I'm benching 200 pounds, 300 pounds. Oh, it's amazing. I'm running a marathon. You can't run 3 marathons. Eventually, the other shoe drops. So the housing market is so high. The stock market is so high. Inflation is so high. Interest rates are so low. You know, the yield from 2 to 30 years, the Treasury puts, and the yield curve, especially the 10-year guys, has nothing to do with mortgage. I see a lot of times someone says, oh, the yield curve is almost 2%. That's amazing for mortgage. It has nothing to do with mortgage. They're mutually exclusive. Sometimes they run on parallel paths, but it's not the same thing. When you say like, oh, it's at 0, That has nothing to do with mortgage. I just want you guys to know that, because I see so many real estate agents that will say like, oh, it's at 0 or it's at 1%. And then clients will call and be like, can I get a 1% loan? I mean, Tracy, you probably get that call when you go to lunch like every day. I mean, you probably get some funny calls, don't you?
I do.
Yeah. And so here's the thing. As I give you more variables, I want you to think about what that variable does. If it snows on Saturday like they're talking about, the grocery store is already almost empty, guys. You're seeing people are buying bread they don't need. They're buying milk they won't use. Well, you got the bunker in the basement.
I went to 2 grocery stores.
Yeah. So here's the thing. It may snow. It may not. And just like that, demand went up. It's not real demand. Like next week that demand goes away, or tomorrow Bradford manages and be like it passed and it went to Nashville. Nashville's been snowing here every week, by the way. We don't get any snow here. Demand is not always real. Demand right now, guys, is the COVID demand when it comes to the housing market. And the housing market and the stock market are brother and sister. They're sister and brother. They really are. If the stock market crashed today, people would stop buying houses. If the housing market crashed today, you'd think they'd put their money in the stock market, but they can't because they don't have any money. Because most people, all their money is in the house. And most people, all their money is in their house, or they've got a HELOC and pulled the money out and borrowed to put more money in their house. See where I'm going with this? I mean, the majority. Are you smart? You just do that?
I've been underwriting for a HELOC, yeah.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Thanks, reason.
No, that's good. No, that's good. Yeah. It depends what you're doing with it. I mean, if you're going to be in the house for a long time, it's amazing. If you're going to sell next year, it's probably not amazing. If a client's going to do work in 3 years, don't let them wait 2.5 years. They should do it today, so when they don't get their money back from it, they at least enjoyed it. You know, I tell people that all the time, guys. So let's go back to 2005. I'm throwing more variables. I'm going to go back in time. Everyone's like, there's no way we're anything like 2005, 6, 7, and 8. And again, the good news is we're not. The bad news is we are. Like, so it's not the same. We don't have Miami and Las Vegas condos that you're flipping before you even close. Like, that doesn't happen anymore. Speculation is gone. We don't have like ninja loans and state loans. Like, I remember buying a condo in 2005 when I moved here, and before I moved here, I was like, yeah, this is how much I make. I make 37,000. Like, oh, you make 73,000. Like, no, I said 37. Sounds good. 73 it is, because it's stated. You know, like, those things are gone. Speculation is gone. No one's flipping condos. No one's using real estate as their tool to retire young, and that's not their business anymore. Flipping homes is coming back, but it's not as popular as it used to be. So that market is that's different. That's not here. But what is here is this blind, and I'm not going to call it faith, but just blind hope, I guess, that things are just going to keep going on forever. And as long as rates stay low, the $2 million home can go to 4, and a $200,000 home can go to 4. But rates aren't staying low any longer. Again, December 23, 2020 was 2.65. Yesterday, it was 3.45. That's 0.8. And you might be like, that's not even 1%. No. Again, guys, that's like 35%. Remember the difference there? If anything moves 35%, you sell and don't buy, right? So if you have a higher rate and you're like, well, you need to sell that rate and get a lower rate. You know, and if someone's looking to sell, and I've said this many times, and I hope I am a broken record with this one, if you're going to sell in the next 5 years, you do it now. But we're starting to see potential of homes in the market. I talk to so many sellers, and like, you tell me when to go in the market. I'm like, yesterday. You know, because as soon as a neighbor goes in the market, because they're relocating. And so in 2005, 6, 7, and 8, the market went through the roof because everyone just got whatever they wanted, right? They just were able to do 100% financing, and they were doing no doc loans and state loans as long as they had credit or said they had credit. I mean, it was crazy what they were able to do. And like negative amortization, did you ever do any of those? Like pick a payment? Like I saw one client bought $1 million home, guys, and their payment options were like normal, which no one ever picked, like principal and interest, taxes and insurance, and it was like $4,200. I'll never forget this statement. The next option was like not escrowing taxes and insurance and like paying that separate, and that lowered it to like $3,700. And then there was like negative amortization, like the minimum on a credit card, and it was like $1,900. And like I could buy 2 of these. Like the husband said that in closing. He's like, honey, we should buy another one. We should buy a beach house. I think they did. And then 4 years later, what do you think happened? They lost both houses. I actually know that for a fact because they called me freaking out. I was like, what do you want to do? The market did what it said it was going to do. Like when they are giving you free money, there's a reason, guys. Like if you're getting free money, if mortgage rates stayed at 2.65, it's not good. They're going up now because they have to, because the economy's been so strong. Like the economy is actually really strong. So now everything's happening because of the economy. They should have happened a year ago, but they held off because of COVID. Everything we've been talking about for the last year or 2 years, a lot of that's been paused, but inflation couldn't wait any longer. Interest rates couldn't wait any longer. Some of the things we talked about like have happened like on a dime because they couldn't wait any longer. There's too much demand, have to raise rates. There's too much demand, prices have to go up. And so that's all happening. Here's the thing, guys. We were talking about foreclosures, what happened in 2008-9, and that's not going to happen again. And don't get me wrong, like none of this is like Charlotte's going to be okay. Like Charlotte's going to move. When we land the plane, you're like, okay, like you're going to land, but there's going to be a little turbulence. Okay, we're going to land. There's other parts of the country that are going to crash. Like it's going to crash. It's going to be dire. But here's the thing. History repeats itself. It's not exactly the same, but it's pretty darn similar. The 2008 crash was because people just thought it can go on forever. And they were borrowing money they didn't have, and they were buying homes they couldn't afford. And the last one out the door shut the light off, and that was the end. And that part's going to happen again. Because if you've been in real estate for the last 3 years, that's all you need. Homes have gone up 50% in 3 years. 50%. You guys know how compounding works, right? If you have any little kids, you put $100 in when they're 3, and they're a millionaire at like 30. You know, you double a penny every day, and like a year later, you have like $1 zillion. Some Facebook meme I saw years ago, but it's true. People just don't have consistency and cadence of doing the same thing predictable. But 2008, people are like, well, this isn't go on forever. Like I actually have texts from clients back then. They're like, no, I'm good. The pick-a-pay client was like, well, I mean, I'm good. Like my job's doing well. You know, this is a really low payment. I got all this extra money. I'll just throw extra at it. But if I don't want to throw extra, I don't. Hey guys, in 2001, right after 9/11, everyone said 2 things. I'm never gonna fly again, and when the market crashed with the recession after that tragedy, I'm gonna start saving. Warren Buffett said that Americans love to buy high and sell low. So what we do, like when people start talking about how the housing market's coming down, you're not gonna brag about buying a home. That's when you're supposed to be doing it, right? And so going back in time so we can go forward, because none of us are Nostradamus, you don't want to say like, I know what's going to happen. Although a lot of things we predicted last year like are now actually happening now. Some of it's COVID. No one on the planet saw COVID happening, and then like having like all these variants like hurricane style. Hopefully this finally goes away and everyone's healthy. But history does repeat itself. And so the next part of 2008 was the stock market crashed. Well, the stock market crashed because so many companies went out of business, and so many companies started losing money, and stocks are attached to earnings. And when profits go down, and when unemployment goes through the roof, and when people can't afford to hire, then, I mean, just earnings just plummeted, and stock market went to its lowest. Now we're at its highest. And so you're thinking like, well, no, it's nothing like that, because we were at its lowest. Now we're at its highest. I'm like, okay. All right, I don't really like roller coasters because I have 2 little boys. I have to learn to ride them. I just kind of close my eyes, and so then Jessica makes me do it again because she wants a picture with my eyes open. So I have to like time my eyes close, open them, close them. And so I open them right when the cameras come. And I like look for them. Actually, I've asked some of the gals sometimes at like Disney World, Legoland, Carowinds. I'm like, hey, where's the camera for those like really cheesy, overpriced pictures you take of us? And I like time it, and I was like, okay, it's there. It's about 3. 1, 2, 3. You know, like I make some cheesy Chandler and Friends face, and Jeff's like, oh, I'm so proud of you, had your eyes open. I'm like, yes, I did for that 1 second. But what is a roller coaster? It goes up and it comes down, and then it goes really low and it goes really high. And then some of the crazy roller coasters like go all the way up steep and they come all the way down, right? Like some of them go straight up and straight down. And that makes you really queasy. Like I get sick just looking up with the G-force. I just have a weak stomach. But every roller coaster on the planet, if it goes up, it has to eventually come back down so you can get off, right? Well, that's how every cycle, every economic cycle works. That's how the stock market works. That's how businesses work. If a business goes like this forever, then it's fake. It's either has money being pumped into it to prop it up. That's what the word prop means, to hold it up. Because again, it has to be affected by the economy. Same with real estate. It can't go up forever. Because in 2008, when it all crashed, it was because the home that went from 200 to 400 in a year didn't commensurate the salaries that did not go from 40 to 80 in a year, right? And oh, by the way, when they're talking about how high the economy was, inflation was going up. And so prices were going up, so everything was going up, and so they felt good in a bubble. When stocks are really high, guys, it's actually not good. Now, if you're retiring a week later, that's awesome. But if you're not retiring a week later, it's not good if you don't like roller coasters. Because when I'm going up a roller coaster and my boy's like, woohoo, and I'm like, this is not good. Because I know what's happening next. Does that make sense? The economy being good is great in a bubble. And if you're gonna be in your home forever, and you're not gonna sell stocks forever, and if you have a bunker in your basement, and you're never gonna buy anything again, that's awesome. But then, like, things change. And so in 2009, in October 2008, when the market crashed, and when I say market, guys, it was every market. It was the housing market. It was the stock market. It was the economy, like globally. It wasn't just the United States, it was the job market. Like everything just went away. People just stopped spending because they didn't have any dollars. What happened was people just foreclosed on their homes. They didn't have extra money in reserves. In 2001, after 9/11, they said they would save. By 2002, the majority of people that were surveyed said they were done saving. Americans are already done being home, like with COVID. Like you can only do something for so long, and you're like, enough's enough. I want to go on vacation. And so let's fast forward to right now for a moment. Last year, the market in real estate in Charlotte and the nation as a whole was supposed to see an increase in supply. And an increase in supply, just like anything else in life, decreases demand. Again, everyone knows that high supply and low demand drops prices. But again, like the lever of when supply goes up, it actually pushes down demand. It's not something that's even talked about in econ school. Like it's just not. Like it's so basic common sense, people don't think to talk about it, but it's really true, is that everyone's like, oh yeah, like, you know, there's so much demand and no supply. Well, yeah, but if that flips, one affects the other. And so last year, there was a lot of pent-up demand to buy, but a lot of that was because there was a lot of pent-up demand to sell that didn't happen. And so people want what they can't have. Do you know how many buyers are out there that are on your buyer list that will never buy a home in Charlotte, North Carolina? Because it's so easy to buy something that's not there, right? Like it's so easy to commit to something with no accountability. And so they say like, oh, I want to buy this home in this school district. Then you like find a home and you're like, I don't understand, like they're finding something wrong with it. They're not committing. They're telling you they want to buy a home because it doesn't exist. If it starts existing, they pull back. And it's not because they're not real, they're not being disingenuous with you. Like there's no imposter syndrome. What's happening is it's really easy to plan without any accountability. Like, oh, I want to buy a beach house. Well, here's a great deal on one. Well, we're not ready now. But you've been saying this for 9 years. Like you said you want to buy a beach house. This is lower than where it was when you said your plan. I had a client about a year ago who was like, yeah, we're going to hold off on buying a home. I want to spend a couple of years saving for my down payment. I'm like, okay, so how much money can you save a year? 10 grand. Okay, that's good. That's awesome. Almost $1,000 a month. Wonderful. You become a millionaire saving 10 grand a year with compounding and just safe mutual funds and bonds. I asked him about the interest rates. Well, what if interest rates go up? Because remember, this is 2020. At the end of 2019, they were 2.65. At the end of 2020, they were 3.05. So they went up 15% in a year. He said, well, that doesn't matter. I'm like, that doesn't make sense. Like, of course it matters. Like, the dollar just went down to you. Oh, we haven't talked about that yet. What about if inflation goes up? Oh, what's the odds of that? I mean, I just went on a website and they said, this story said inflation's not going anywhere. I'm like, okay, so interest rates are never gonna go up. They're gonna stay free forever. Prices are never gonna go up. They're gonna stay free forever. Like, nothing's gonna change. Housing prices aren't gonna go up. They're gonna stay free forever. Everything's gonna be static. And the only dynamic thing is that you're gonna control how many dollars you save. What do you think happened? Interest rates went up, so his payment went up. Housing prices went up, so his payment went up. Prices of everything else went up, so he didn't save as much. And now it's like, yeah, we're just gonna stay in our home. And which means that, yeah, they're not selling, guys, but they're also not buying. So let's get off of Charlotte for a moment. This is actually really critical to hear. This might be the most important thing to hear. Real estate, believe it or not, guys, is location, location, location. I know you've never heard that before, but it really is. So when one of your friends in Chicago is like, oh, the market's so hot here, like, it's not always so hot everywhere. COVID has created this like hot bubble. I remember I spoke in Denver a couple of years ago with a guy from New York, and he said he cried on the flight to Denver from New York City because he lost a $7 million deal on the way. He's like, oh, I just lost another one, that's 2 today. And the market was crashing. Like the New York City market crashed 2 years ago. You guys didn't even see it because we're in Charlotte. Like people are buying $7 million condos there, and here it's like 200,000. Like it's just night and day. So they're not even real, right? New York City, the Bay Area, Northern California, Chicago, Houston, like there's parts of the country, Miami, that have nothing to do with Charlotte, guys. So you think the media on a national scale is worrying about Charlotte, North Carolina? It's not. It's not worrying about Charlotte, it's not worrying about Dallas, Tampa, Seattle, Austin, Fort Worth, Midland, Albuquerque. There's about 10 cities that the whole country's moving to. And we're one of them, so congratulations. But here's the thing, guys, they have to come from somewhere. So when we live in a bubble and we say like, oh, well, first of all, the whole housing market's hot. Well, first of all, that's not true outside of a bubble. Because when someone puts on Instagram and Facebook, if you like text them privately, like actually no, like it's been in the market for 2 months, we just plummeted the price 200 grand and we just went on the contract. But all I'm gonna say is how I went on the contract, my marketing is amazing, I'm the best agent in the world, and some of you already did clients. They're gonna tell you that no one's moving to New York City, right? No one's moving to San Francisco or the Bay Area. One of the reasons for that is there's been a shift towards Texas, Florida, and the Carolinas for about a decade now. But the other reason for that is COVID made it where people can work remotely, so they can live anywhere. It also made it where they can buy remotely, so they could just stay in California and New York and be here. And then lastly, like there's a lot of people that just want to be able to spread out. Like COVID just scared a lot of people. So here's the thing, it's not 9/11, it's not 2008, but humans make decisions, and once they make it, they don't forget. There's people that will never fly again after 9/11. And if they do, they have anxiety, they need Dramamine, and they need all these anxiety pills and stuff. There's people that will never get a loan again. Like people are loving loans, I just refinance, but there's some people that are like, I will never put myself in a situation that I did before. Like if you were a part of that, no matter what it was, you know, I had a family member who was has passed away 15 years ago, but they experienced the Holocaust. So for them, like whatever that trauma or challenge is in life, once you've experienced it, here's the thing. Everyone's like, well, no, I mean, that was just so different. That was just so different. Okay, it was very different and very much the same, guys. Here's the thing. Charlotte's real estate market is always gonna be one of the strongest. It also means it's gonna be one of the strongest bad markets. Like, you know, so when the market collapses and people don't wanna buy houses because they're too high, then they're too high. And so I'm not saying that's happening yet, we haven't got to that yet, but I'm just throwing a lot out there. So let's go back to some of the variables that impact the housing market. Well, we already said mortgage rates are going up. Now here's the thing I don't know the answer to, I have my own opinion, Teresa's the mortgage expert, is they were 2.65 Christmas, 2 days before Christmas, 2020. They went up to 3.05 same time this past year, a few weeks ago. It's almost like February, guys. Like the year's gonna be over. We're talking about summer and then back to school and then again. But it went to 3.75 last week. So it went up over a percentage point, which was literally, we talked about a million times, like a 40% hike in a year. And so now it's back to 3.45. But it's historically one of the lowest rates. Now here's the thing, is it gonna go back down to 2.65? Is there a better chance it goes up to 2.65 is about 0.8 percentage points? Is it gonna go down 0.8 or up 0.8? What do you guys think? Okay, you guys are really smart. So 100%. Well, 0.8 up, 3.45 up 0.8. On a 400,000 home, which is not far off, our median right now is about 330. But on a 400,000 home, just 'cause I'm putting you on the spot, what would what's a 3.5% rate on normal taxes on a 400,000 home payment?
I couldn't answer that for you.
Is it?
I look at the PITI, so I don't know what that is.
See, she's the expert. She doesn't want to store a number. It's around like 1,800, right? Does that sound about right?
Sure.
Sure. Okay. A 0.8 percentage point, which again is about 30%. It doesn't raise it a true 30% because some of it is principal if the price doesn't change, and some of it is taxes if the price doesn't change, and a little bit is insurance. But I will promise you that an $1,800 payment at 3.45 that goes up 0.8, because you all said it's going to go up 0.8 before it goes back down. It went down 0.8. It went up 0.8 in the last 13 months, guys. 12 and a half months. It went up 0.8. So if it does 0.8 in the next 12, 13 months, by the end of this year, next January, that's going to raise an $1,800 payment roughly $200. Now, for some people, they're like, what's $200? Well, you know what? Take $2,400, which is 1 year of those payments, take that cash, put it in an envelope, go home, and put it on the counter and say, I put $24 there. And then lose it, and find out who's has the first curse word versus the 100th. You talk to a billionaire and ask them what they would do if they lost an envelope with $2,000. We lose deals because we woke up, right? Like, in real estate, you don't count your chickens for the hatch. Like, you go into contract on a $400,000 house, $4 million house, $50,000 house. It's all big numbers, but you don't count the commit. You should not count your commission until it's done. I hope, you know, if you have a W-2 job, you kind of hope that, like, as long as you don't get fired, like, that, like, your job's there, it doesn't go away. But in real estate, we kind of just know, like, okay, that 2 grand, that 10 grand, 100 grand, 5 grand, whatever it is, that's not your money until it's in your bank account. Is that fair? But if you got a $50 bill in your purse, and you're at, like, the car wash, and they're not taking credit, and, like, it's all muddy, and you have this big client, or you have date night in, like, an hour, and you're like, where's that $50 bill? You'll, like, go through your car and, like, go nuts in your car to find that $50 bill. And it'll really bother you when you realize you probably dropped it at the grocery store. So when someone thinks, like, $200 a month is, like, a hassle to save $200 a month, that's a problem in America. That's a problem with our society, because there's kids. We're about to do this huge partnership with Samaritan's Feet where we have to give at least $250,000 this year, and hopefully more, to put shoes on 10,000 kids' feet. So if it's $25 for a pair of shoes for a little boy or girl who needs the dignity and protection of shoes that have soles with no holes, let's not assume and let our clients tell us that $200 a month doesn't matter, because it does matter. And when they're doing the budget, they realize that it does matter. And so human decision does matter. And so what happens is they can't buy that house anymore, because then the holidays come this year and they're like, wow, the housing price went too high, and there's options now. So mortgage rates go up, that actually brings down the real estate market. Now here's the thing, interest rates go up when the market is very strong. So again, short term, I'm gonna go back to short term, guys. I don't want you to hear anything the wrong way. There's short term, there's long term. Like I believe in living in 3 minutes, being present like we all are, and in 3 years. That's more long term. But in the economy, there's short term, 3 minutes, and there's like long term, which is like 3 months. What happens in a bubble, we can do anything. Guys, we can sit here and just like eat all the steak in the world, eat all the barbecue chips, all the french fries, all the loaded potatoes, the cheeseburgers, blah, 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 all day long, and maybe never see the effects. Try doing that for a week. Try doing that for a month. See what happens over time. See how fast 2 months from now you look in the mirror and you're like, what happened to me? How do you feel? Your stomach? Like, you won't leave the bathroom for a year, right? Like, one day you can do anything. Like, one day of a bump in the rate, no one notices it. But when it's happening over a whole year, you look up and it's an 80% hike, it changes everything, guys. And so mortgage rates are going up. Again, in the short run, where you're gonna read, if you Google enough, if you do enough Googling, why do mortgage rates go up? Just the layman's terms is because the economy is strong enough to support it, right? Like, you know, the inflation is up because the economy is strong. Like, there was deflation in 2009. So again, everything looks to be the absolute opposite of the last housing market crash. As I keep building this, I want you guys to see that. It's the absolute opposite, or it's exactly the same, right? Because you're looking at what happened afterwards, not what hasn't happened yet. See, when 9/11 happened, they spent a lot more time looking at what allowed these criminals and these terrorists to get into the United States, then how to get them into the airport, and how did they get on the plane, and how did they bring boxcars. They spend so much more time looking back than looking forwards or even in present time. They spend a lot less time looking at like the safety and rescue part of like what went well, one did it, because it's already too late. They went all the way back in time to like, how do we get here? And so what I'm doing now is I'm kind of like getting us back to today so you can decide where we're going next. So in the past, you know, everything was the opposite, it looks like, than today. Because you know what? Before late 2008 happened, it was early 2008. And if you Google August 2008, everything was at all-time highs. And if you remember the race, the tone changed overnight. The tone changed from the economy has never been stronger to the economy's never been worse. And you're gonna see that again. You're gonna see that again. Like, guys, as COVID, like, hopefully just starts dissipating, there's a lot more people vaccinated, there's a lot more, like, the pills are starting to get approved, like a lot of things are happening to safeguard. It's starting to become, I guess, part of the herd immunity. It's starting to become weaker. It's more contagious, but it's like, but a lot of scientists are saying that's actually a good thing, because it means it's like getting through everybody, and immune systems aren't able to fight it all because it's getting weaker. People will shift focus. As people get more comfortable, I mean, look, there's like 40 people in this room right now. A year ago, guys, like, I couldn't even imagine asking people to show up, you know, and things will change, and sellers will feel more comfortable going on the market. and things will change, and people will focus a little bit less on real estate and a little bit more on taking that vacation that they've been holding off on 3 years. And things will change, and they'll do the wedding, and maybe they'll look at doing that business or their dream, whatever that is. Things are just gonna change a little bit because we've had 2+ years of pent-up demand to live life. See, if COVID never happened, the real estate market would be rebounding right now. And the real estate market went so high. 18% last year, it's doubled in 6 years. And so if COVID wasn't dissipating, the housing market could just stay up forever because no one will go on the market. Does that make sense? Inflation would be really high and people couldn't afford anything, but they just put it on credit. That's really what has been happening. People are using their cash and credit to just buy whatever they need to. They're using retirement money put down on their dream home because they have to. There's no other options, right? They're borrowing really cheap loans, cheap rates, which is awesome. Like if you have a rate above 3.45, you shouldn't. If you have a client above 3.45, they should sell or borrow. But what's about to happen is people are starting to look at their bank accounts, or are going to start looking at their bank accounts. They're gonna start looking at their budgets. They're gonna stop getting so distracted by what's going on online, starting to become white noise. Then you start planning. I really wanted to buy that beach house. I really want to take that vacation. I really wanted to downsize. We need to upgrade. They need to do all these things. But before they do any of those things, their house has to hit the market. And as soon as a home hits the market, one home becomes 4 homes. Because when the next home hits the market, it usually goes below the last home, right? If a home's on the market 500, the next one goes in the market, if it's not on the contract, it's 450. Well, I don't want to wait. Like, they overpriced it. A week ago, they were like celebrating that they're going on the market 500. Now they're like, well, it's been a week, it hasn't gone on the contract yet. It must be crazy overpriced. I can't afford it. What's also happening as COVID starts dissipating is people are going back to work. And what that means is people can't live on their land anymore. They have to come closer in. It also means people are going to get back on planes. They're going to get back on trains. They're going to get back on buses. They're going to start traveling again. They're going to start being more transient again. Everything's going to get back to the new normal of 2019. And if you look back at 2019, if you read stories from 2019, what you'll find is in 2019, the stock market was nowhere near as high as it is today, but the stock market was growing because there's so much money, not because earnings were so high. And inflation was too low, and so they were wondering what's going to happen when inflation goes up and the stock market comes down. What's going to happen to the stock market? Well, obviously it's going to come down. But then 2020 happened, and 2021 happened. Now, we didn't have COVID in 6, 7, or 8, thankfully. We didn't have COVID on 9/11, but we had COVID last year. We had COVID the year before. And so this kind of chaos, tragedy, challenge, either war from foreigners or something internally, it changes how people think and how they act. And so everyone froze, guys. When people are in fear, they usually either freeze, or they fight, or they flee. Well, the last year or two, everyone's frozen. They're like, well, I'm not going anywhere. I'm gonna hunker at home. Like Shannon said, I'm just gonna buy lots of ramen noodles, lots of paper towels, and lots of granola bars for my little ones. But then you get cabin fever, and you want to get back out. And then your employer says you have to come back to work. And guys, I hope I'm really dumbing this down for myself. A lot of times in life, I think we want to be busy so we feel successful, and we want to act like things are complicated so we seem intelligent. That's all ego edging that out, guys. Like, I'm trying to dumb this down for everyone, looking at myself in the mirror before even y'all, because it's so basic. Like, everyone thinks, well, someone else is smarter than you are. It's not the truth. All I have going for me is that when I was coming out of school, I had the opportunity to see what all the variables do for all the variables, and they all work together. You can raise your kids up the right way, and they get around a kid who's not as well behaved, and then your kid is not well behaved, right? Like, one of your friends says they're going to sell their house. You just went from I'm going to wait for a year to I'm going to sell tomorrow, either because they got more money or because they went low, and now you freaked out. But you freaked out both ways, guys. When I say we are our clients. They might have a different personality type. They might have a different situation today, but buying is almost the same for everyone. It's something that needs to feel good emotionally and then hopefully make sense logically, but people don't act on logic. They act on emotion. So with inflation as high as it is, that's awesome for the economy in the short run. But when you're doing your budget, and some of y'all have that high analytic personality where you actually have a budget, guys, I watch it happen. I watched hairspray go from $4.98. I know I use hairspray, you can laugh at me, but from $4.98 to $7.99 in a year. I go to CVS a year ago, the same thing was $4.99. Now it's $7.98. Yeah, but it's only $3. Well, I use hairspray a lot, so for me it's $3 times 3 cans a month. My boy's starting to learn how to use hairspray. And if it's hairspray, guys, it's also milk. If it's milk, it's also bread. And it's not even the supply chain, guys, it's just what it is. Again, and you're thinking like, well, supply chain's gonna go away, it's not gonna get back to normal. Yes, that's all going to happen. That's the good news. It's not bad news. I'm just telling you what's happening in real time. We had a recession 2 years ago and the housing market didn't move. Well, here's the thing. The housing market, 3 out of the last 5 times there was a recession, it went up. And so this one went up. So now it's 4 of the last 6. So believe it or not, 67% of the last 3 decades of recessions, every 7-8 years, the housing market's actually gone up. One of these times it has to go down, right? I mean, it went down in 9/11. It can't just always go up. The housing market's been going up since 2009. And so in 2008 and 2007, they're like, well, I mean, I bought this condo for $500 in Miami. I'm sure I could sell it for $650. Yeah, but the people that sold it to you, they bought it for $375. And the people that sold it to you bought it for $375, but they bought it from someone who paid $190. And this has all happened over 18 months. So now you use logic, because people don't act on logic. You have to use logic for your clients, because they're gonna act on emotion, guys. And so it went from 180 to 620 in 18 months. You know what the numbers are on that? Like, when you look back, I mean, The Big Short, I haven't watched that in like a year or so, but when I watched that movie, I'm like, it's so obvious, right? Like, it was so obvious that you don't see it. You all have had a listing, or you've helped a buyer buy someone else's listing. Look at the last 10 years. And look at how inflation has not really done much in the last 10 years. And ask yourself, when inflation now gets to normal, which 8 to 10% is too high, but 3 to 4% is where it's gonna be, that means prices just keep going up. Every single month, prices are going up. And so in the short run, you're like, yeah, that just means housing prices go up forever. Really? Do you have to buy a new house as much as you need milk? Do you have to buy a new house as much as you need to keep the electric on and the water on? Do you need to buy a new house or upgrade your house from the house you already have as much as you need to pay for doctor bills? You see where I'm going with this? And they want a vacation now. So your clients want the vacation they haven't taken the last 2 years. They put their money in their house. They renovated their house. They bought the bigger house. 1, because they didn't have anything else to do with their money. 2, because money was free. Rates are going up. It's not as free as it was yesterday. It's still really low. If someone's going to do something, they need to borrow as soon as they refinance, borrow the money. Like, if you're going to borrow, you should borrow before it gets too high, right? And try to fix it. What's amazing about inflation and mortgages is a 30-year fix today, even at 3.5%, 10 years from now, the net present value of those dollars is like 1.75. Does that make sense? Because you fix a $500,000 home at $2,000 a month, 10 years from now, that $2,000 in today's dollars is like $1,300 because of inflation. So it's still really smart. I'm throwing a lot at you guys, but like, it's still really smart. What's gonna happen is it's gonna get more and more expensive to buy a home because it's already happening. Inflation has picked up. So in the short run, it looks great. In the long run, 1, you can't afford the home because it's getting more expensive to build it. 2, you can't afford the home because you don't have the disposable income. And 3, you can't afford the home because interest rates have gone up. We haven't talked about a big part of all this. When people have their money in the stock markets, because they don't know where else to put it. Is that fair? Everyone, either yourself or you know someone who's like, I feel like I'm wasting money keeping it in cash. You know, there's no home to buy. There's nothing to do with my money. Like, savings rates are 0.000001% in the bank. So I'll just put it in the stock market. Well, when the Treasury raises the yield and savings gets to 1%, 1.5%, and you can put it in a money market and get 1.5%, you're like, okay, that's not great. It's not bad. You know, and you see 10-year bonds are paying like 4%. You're like, okay, I'm gonna retire in 10 years. My clients are gonna retire in 10 years. I have $100,000. You know, 4% a year, it's not bad. You know, that's $4,000 extra money every year. That's not bad. Stock market's really high, I'll start moving my money. They don't move the money until either they have to, because the economy crashes, or because there's another option. We talked about this. Is there another option? Well, in real estate, no one moves when there's another option. In money, they always do. If someone can make money, they'll make money because they woke up. Like, there's nothing else more important outside of family, and sometimes money becomes a master. Like, that is just what happens to people, guys. When they find a way, it's why, like, Bernie Madoff was able to get billions of dollars from very smart people. Because when it comes to, like, when someone is, because they act on emotion again. But even the logic is the stock market's never been as high as it is today. Well, a couple weeks ago it was about, yesterday was 36,300 and 36.9 was the highest ever, like 2 weeks ago. So it's essentially, it's within the margin of error, the highest ever. And so if you give people a reason to somewhere to put their money, one or two things are gonna start happening. Either more homes are gonna hit the market, they're gonna move the money out of the stock market and put it down in the new house, or interest rates are gonna go up. I'm not talking about mortgage now, I'm talking about savings, and they're gonna start moving their money towards a safer investment. They've already made 10, 15, 20% a year for so many years. Well, okay, let's look at both those options for a moment. If more homes hit the market, what does that do for value of homes? It brings it down. Let's say more homes don't hit the market, but people start moving their money towards savings, which is starting to happen. You know, when inflation goes up, bonds are not as attractive because 10 years from now, 4%, you know, it's not very attractive. That's why the Fed is raising the yield, because they want people to be able to have a savings mechanism, right? And they feel like the economy is really strong with inflation. So they start moving their money out of the stock market. What happens to those stocks? So what happens to they go down? What happens to a company when inflation goes from 1% to 8% overnight? When it costs the end user $4 for bread, what happens to the company? Do you think the grocery store is still buying it for $1 and they're making $3 now? They just keep raising prices because they're bored and they're greedy? What is it costing them? If it was $1 a year ago, what is that loaf of bread costing today? It's going up, right? And so you're like, well, no, stock market's going to go up forever. Guys, something has to give. Remember, I wanted to throw a lot out there, and I'm trying to, like, now I'm making it where, like, you can talk to anybody. You can talk to your kids, your grandkids, you can talk to your best friend, your clients, and just ask questions. And they're like, well, this is all making a lot of sense now. I'm trying to unpack it all and then pull it all back together. And like, Glenn, I'm going to tie a bow on it. Hope you taking notes, or you're all right. Telling the world, don't tell the world the housing market's crashing. It's not. It is going to in San Francisco, New York. It is, but not here. But if it crashes in New York, how do those people sell their $3 million home for 1.5 and they owe $2 million and move here? How come no one's talking about that? No, but everyone's moving to Charlotte. What are they all renting like in Kansas right now, just waiting for the house at the market in Charlotte? So we're gonna get to that in a second, guys. So here's the thing. When people start moving the money out of the stock market, which will happen, it's already happening. There's so much cash on the sidelines, guys. There's so much cash on the sidelines. People just don't know what to do with it. Now it's going to bread and milk and diapers, but they don't know what to do with it. They're gonna start putting it into safer investments. There's just nothing right now. It's either make 15% of the stock market or make nothing. So just keep it in cash, because it's safer, right? It's more liquid. They're gonna start moving it. And when stock market goes down, because again, one, that people have moved their money out. There's less buyers for stocks, what happens, guys? Do you know how stocks go up more often than not? In America, 98% of humans, outside of like Warren Buffett and a few other really smart people, they buy stocks when everyone else buys stocks. And so it's like fake demand, just like 2008. I mean, again, it's what we do, guys. Like, we love to buy high and sell low. Your friends tell you about the stock they bought, you buy it. Tesla's hot, you buy it. You know who bought Tesla last week because of how high it is? You should be selling Tesla last week because of how high it is. Right? Like Elon Musk was like, he's like, yeah, you know, some guy in the front row was like, yeah, I had like 2,000 shares of stock back in like 2004 and I sold them all like a month later. He's like, well, you're not that smart. You know, like, everyone buys when they should be selling in America, and everyone sells when they should be buying in America. But forget about all that logic. Let's forget about all that emotion, because Americans buy on emotion, they sell on emotion. Let's get to logic for a moment. Forget about what happens to companies and the stock value. Look, and again, guys, I hope, you know, this was called State of the Economy, so you know, like, it's not all about houses, but houses are like the largest financial decision most people ever make, so it all circles. It all circles around the real estate piece. If people are selling stock, there's less buyers, and that's very obvious. Stock prices go down. And if inflation's picking up, which is going to come back down, I mean, 7.7 and 9.8 for consumer and producer price index respectively is too high. If you remember last year, anyone who heard the conversation, we're like, it needs to be around 4. Historically, it needs to be 2.1, but when you're at 0 and negative, you have to overcompensate for that, which is where we are today. But when it gets that high, companies start losing money because they can only pass pricing forward for so long. And so now companies are showing either loss or less earnings. And so now the stock prices go down more. Well, what happens when stock prices come down? What does the average American do? They sell They should be buying. That's what Warren Buffett would do. He loves when they come down, dollar cost averaging, but most people do not do that. They sell. So now people are selling. What happens to the stock market? See, last year it was supposed to go down, and it showed in March. It plummeted 2 days, guys. 2 days in March were worse than Black Monday and Great Depression. It showed what was possible. It went down more than 2 days than it went down in 2009 and the whole year, like percentage-wise. I mean, it just collapsed. It showed you how fast the lights can go off. Power goes out, and you're like, holy cow, I didn't realize. Like, I've got, all these things going on. So now stock prices are going down even more. People sell because they're going down. People sell because they're going down. It keeps going down. What happens to your client who's like, yeah, I'm thinking about buying that home. I really don't want to go 400. That one's 500. I mean, if I just pull some money out of my stocks. And who's heard people say that? Well, when their stocks went from 200,000 to 150, and they have 5 years left until retirement. These are real life examples, guys. Like, you all know these people. Do you think they feel as confident or less confident in buying that new home? If their stock account just went down 20%. They felt less, right? Well, you haven't talked about the housing market yet, guys. I'm just showing you everything else that's going on in the world that impacts the housing market. Okay, so here's the thing. They decide not to buy the home, but the seller still has to sell that home. And oh, by the way, when your stock account goes down 20% and you've been thinking about holding your home or selling, what do you think people do? Now, some people won't sell, don't get me wrong. They're like, well, I have nowhere to go. The people that are looking to buy their dream home, don't move. But people that are downsizing because they're oldest and get ready to graduate, and they're like, okay, I need to get out. All of my money, my kid's college education is in equity. I need to protect that. They sell and they rent. They sell and they get a townhome or a condo. They just downsize a year or two sooner. It's probably not a bad idea. It's actually what we probably should be advising. They're going to move in the next 5 years like we talked about. They should do it now. But here's the thing. They didn't sell and upgrade, and they may not even have sold and bought. So they're not buying because the stock market went down, but they are being forced to sell because now all their worth is not in stock. Maybe they had 200,000 stock and they had 200,000 equity in house. Well, 2 years ago they had 100 each, and they thought it was going to keep going up forever. And they saw the stock market go down, and they thought, wow, I need to protect my real estate. I can't control the stock market. Does that make sense? Now it moves over to real estate. And they looked at their budget and they realized with pricing so high, everything's getting more expensive. Now, inflation's going to come back down, guys. Inflation's going to come back down because it has to. But what's going to make inflation come back down is something that makes inflation come back down. What makes inflation come back down? The decrease in
supply.
Yeah, so Holly, you just nailed it. Like, increase in supply, decrease in demand. So I told you, we're doing good in time. I told you about an hour ago that inflation's going to come back down. Last year I said it was going to go up, and it did, and now it's going to come back down. Well, something has to trigger it to come back down. When it comes back down, that's not good. You might think for your client it's good because they have more money for bread. Well, no, it came back down because no one bought bread. It came back down because Shannon bought all the bread. So don't buy all the bread. We can't
Yes,
hold.
sir. Just
Everyone-
two loaves.
Okay, that's not bad. But all kidding aside, I'm joking about that because people are doing that in real estate. People are like, I'll just buy a beach house. I'll just buy the house. Money's free. And they should, if they need the house. But what's been happening the last few years is they're like, well, I'll just do forbearance. And I'm sure by the end of the year, I'll be in a better place. If you didn't have your $1,800 payment in June, and you didn't have it in July, this last year, kind of bringing us towards the current state so we can see what's going to happen this year. And you didn't have it in August, you didn't have it in September, you also didn't have it in October. When the statement came in November saying that you owed 5 months times $1,800, right, which is $9,000, you still need your November payment. Oh, and you need your December payment. So you didn't have $1,800 in June, but now you have $9,000 plus 18, you have $10,800. No, you don't have any of that. So what happens next? Tracy, you warn against this, but you know there's someone out there. There's tons of people out there. By the way, just because they don't put on Instagram that they haven't made a payment, means they probably haven't made a payment. No one's going to brag that they're in a bad place financially. They were in forbearance, and now they owe it all. So the credit's shot, so they can't refinance. And I don't know how they got the money to make up for all the payments when they couldn't make the first one. It's a horrible situation. Now here's the good news. They should be able to sell and make that money back and pay it off, okay? And a lot of people will. That means more homes are gonna hit the market. You hear about the homes that are gonna hit the market that are foreclosures, that's also coming. Because some of those people held on tight and they did not go on the market, okay? So they did forbearance, And then the banks did not have the same supply as 2008. So like, okay, we're foreclosing. And homes are already going into pre-foreclosure, they're going to default, and they will hit the market. There's other people that will hit the market because they decided. So some are gonna be bank REOs and some are gonna be pre-foreclosure, but they're all gonna hit the market. Now, when that hits the market and your client was thinking about waiting a couple of years and they're all on the market for a lower price, one because it's pre-foreclosure and the bank just wants to get their money back, they don't care if they get top dollar, and the other one just wants to get their equity, they can't afford to wait any longer because they don't have any more months to have before they foreclose. Your client's in a great place financially, but their home was worth 600, now two homes just hit the market, one for 450 and one for 500. What's your home worth? What's your client's home worth? So now your home's not worth any more than 525, right? So what does the next door neighbor do? Not only does the next door neighbor have to come down to the price of either the lowest common denominator or the highest, it can't be much higher. You can go really high in price, guys, we love to do that, when there's no other options. Because when someone says, like, this seems high, I'm like, fair enough, show me a better home. It's like, there's nothing else on the market. I'm like, okay, then what are you comparing it to? And then it sells, right? But as soon as there's competition, people just stop. People freeze in fear, and they freeze when they have options. Kids love options, adults hate options. They just do nothing. And so this year, as the economy starts opening up, this year, as inflation pushes up pricing on what you have to buy, and as inflation forces the Treasury to increase the yield on other rates, not including mortgage, as the mortgage rates start going up, because they need to, purchasing has been so strong for so long, stocks and real estate are the most liquid. People say real estate's not liquid, and it's not that liquid, which is what makes it go down. Like it's right now, you put your house on the market, it's on the contract in a week, you close a month later, you're done. When homes start sitting, people get really scared, and then they make them liquid. And then the $600,000 home that you list for $525, they're like, holy God, it's still not low enough, just go to 500, just go to 3. And all that equity just dissipates, guys. It just goes away almost overnight. And so when I start looking at all these variables, I'm gonna start pulling them all together. If your client wants to buy a home and they don't own a home right now, and they're getting a loan, they should do it, 100%. They're gonna pay top dollar, but they're borrowing close to the bottom, and rates are on the upward swing. And if they wait, and you guys all have seen this, you shared the memes, like it takes a 10% drop in a house to make up for a 1 percentage point increase in a rate. Well, guys, rates are moving and prices are also moving. So they're both moving up. And so something has to give. And it's either going to be rate or price. I don't see rates come back down, because when I start climbing that roller coaster, I know when it's going to come down, and I have to get really high first, unfortunately, because my boys are getting older and they want the higher, steep highs. So rates will probably get to about 4.5%. And Teresa's the expert, and she may disagree, and I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm just looking back in time, because every time that there has been a recession, every time there's been either a recession or a housing decline, it was followed by rates at heights, because rates went up when the market went up, right? But the market just went up and rates haven't gone up. You guys realize that? Like the housing market's been going up since 2010, and rates are like at all-time lows. And so rates could probably be 5%. They probably should have been 5% 2 years ago. And so they have to go up. Like they have to go up. Eventually, they have to go up. And savings rates have to go back up. And credit card rates have to go back up. And they just have to. And then hopefully when the rates go up, that brings down pricing, right? Like, so there's an inverse reaction with inflation. Inflation went up also because rates are so low. There's like free money. It's just like, it's not worth as much. Does that make sense? And so if I wanted to just, in layman's terms, say like what I believe on the housing market, the stock market, inflation, and just the overall economy, first and foremost, guys, take your eyes off of Charlotte. Fix your eyes on the Bay Area. Look at Toronto. Look at Vancouver. Look at New York City. Because when New York City collapsed 2 years ago, Charlotte was about to happen, and then COVID hit. When San Francisco goes down, guys, and New York goes down, first of all, the hot markets lag because there's more demand, okay? So we have more demand here. There's more demand. Charlotte, Raleigh, Tampa, Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin. You guys know all this. Albuquerque, Seattle. It's about 8 to 10 markets the whole country's moving to. And the whole country's moving from like 3 areas. The whole country's moving from like Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota, New York, New Jersey, San Francisco. Like that's just where the whole country is moving from. And so we're only as strong as them. Does that make sense? And so they go down first. They go up first, they go down first. So let's go back to 2008 again. The housing market in San Francisco and New York City and Vegas and Chicago and Houston, all these like really big markets, was collapsing in 2006 and 2007. And we just had our heads in the sand. We're like, well, it's gonna go up forever. And they're like, well, we can't afford to move to Charlotte anymore because we don't have a job, we just foreclosed on our home, and our market's horrible here. We lost our job here, our equity went down here, we can't afford to move. So we'll still move to Charlotte, but we'll rent. You guys remember how rental rates went through the roof? You see how like history can maybe repeat itself? Everyone's moving. Again, like I can't tell you how many times a week someone's like, David, the housing market's never gonna come down in Charlotte. The whole country's moving here. I'm like, okay, well, I mean, they have to sell their house there and have a buyer for their house there. You see how I'm like kind of bringing this in now? Like, if everyone's moving to Charlotte, where are they coming from? California, the upper Midwest, like Rust Belt area, I guess, like Buffalo, New York, Rochester, Cleveland, Ohio, Michigan, Minnesota. And I get it, it's like blizzards all up there. But for them to move here, they have to find someone to move there. And if there is more people moving here than moving there, that only lasts for so long. If there's more people that want to sell condos in Miami and Vegas during speculation than there are people wanting to buy and live in those condos, what happened was the last speculator ran out and they had to find an owner occupant and it didn't exist. See where I'm going with this? There's not unlimited buyers. And oh, by the way, there's buyers in London, and there's buyers in China, and there's buyers in all over the Eastern Hemisphere. And here's the thing, they're not owner occupants, they're investors. So they're gonna buy when it's cheap, and they're not buying right now. You know, they're gonna wait. And so there's no doubt in my mind that when you start seeing your clients say, now's the time to sell, either because they make a smart decision before an economic indicator forces them, like their budget condenses because of inflation, or the stock market comes down and they don't have as much money in there, or they realize that they can't rely on the stock market, so they start buying golds and silver and precious metals. You know, start doing all this crypto stuff, which is getting really popular too. There's always going to be a really strong market here, but as soon as you start seeing, like I would be reading, I'm not a fan of a lot of media, but I do watch what's happening in Canada, because Canada comes first. It does when it comes to the economy. Like if you see Toronto go down and Vancouver, which we're starting to see. Guys, Toronto 2 years ago, $1 million homes are going for 3. $2 million homes are going for like 4 to 5. And their days of market's picking up. Vancouver's prices are starting to fall because everyone's leaving. They got too high. If you look at the Bay Area, you look at New York City, there's people always going to live there just because it's one of the strongest economies and one of the strongest tourist areas in both areas. But it's gotten so high that you're starting to see supply pick up. And the media will tell you that means everyone wants to be there. No. When supply picks up, it means people don't want to be there. Like, I'm from New York City, guys. Like, I love it. Like, my mom is buried in Brooklyn. Like, I love New York City. But there's more people that love Charlotte than New York City. And that's awesome because it convinced someone else to love New York City. Or they can't move here. And so what's happening right now is everyone is kind of just selling their homes in New York. And they're selling their homes in California. And that's great. But eventually they're going to run out of buyers. And they're either going to run out of buyers because they're not wanting to buy in that area, or they're going to run out of buyers because the buyers can't afford because mortgage rates went up. Or they don't want to do it because they're saving their money because they just lost so much in the stock market. So there's a lot of like volatile variables right now, and something has to give. So what I believe is going to happen in Charlotte in the short term versus 2-3 years is I believe this year we're not going to see much change. You're going to see a little bit of an uptick in supply. So we will see prices fall. And the higher the price point, the larger percentage. Not just, it's kind of the tax system on one end where like if you make 100,000, you're gonna pay more in taxes than if you make 10,000 because even at the same percentage, you know, 10% on 100,000 is 10,000, 10% on 10,000 is 1,000. But also in the tax system, like it's a progressive system where as you make more, you pay a higher percentage. That happens in all aspects of life. When real estate goes up in price, it falls at a higher percentage depending on how high it is. So for example, a $5 million home could fall overnight 30% to 3.5 because the sellers are able to, and the number of buyers just goes away. The $300,000 home may never drop more than 10, 12% because there's so much more demand. Does that make sense? And so we're not gonna see a collapse in Charlotte at all. We will see it in other parts of the country. We'll start seeing it in the media this year because they're starting to already move on from a lot of the COVID conversations to the economy. But what you're gonna see in Charlotte is you're gonna see an increase in supply. And the higher price points, you're gonna start seeing some sellers that get antsy. And they're like, it's been 2 days, why is my house not on the contract? Drop the price. Well, a $2 million home, 10% is 200 grand, they'll go to 1.75. That's the next move. A $250,000 home can't go to 0, right? So the $2 million home went to 1.75, that's just a normal drop. The $250,000 home can only go to 225 as the next bracket. Does that make sense? And so what happens is the higher price points are gonna drop a lot more, not just dollars, but percentages. And when you start seeing that happen, when you start seeing, if you look online and watch Toronto and Vancouver, I'm flipping it, like, look at me, Toronto, Vancouver, and then New York City and San Francisco, those 4 markets control the whole North America. And when those start coming down, they are moving everywhere else. And they have all the dollars, and they have the largest population. Houston as well, obviously, but most people are staying in Houston. But those 4 markets, guys, on a real estate side, control so much of the housing market in the whole nation. And when you start seeing changes there, you know, when I saw home price in Toronto go from 1 to 3 overnight, I saw people in Charlotte, I'm like, oh, we're next. You know, it took us a while, right? And so just like before, in 2005 and 6 and 7, housing prices in those markets were crashing. We were still going up. We're so far behind. Well, those markets starting to slow. They're definitely starting to slow. They blamed a lot of it on COVID, and some of it is true. But again, everything is blamed on something, guys. Everything has something. There has to be a cause for every effect. And so like everything has a leading indicator. And so when you see that start happening, when your clients say, well, everyone's moving to Charlotte, there's always gonna be a buyer for my house. I mean, really, where are they coming from? They're coming from a market no one wants to be in anymore? Where's their money coming from when the stock market goes down? Where's their money coming from? Because inflation will go from 8 to 4, but it's not gonna go from 4 to 0. So what I want you guys to hear too, as I have all these variables out here, now I'm pulling them all together. The housing market went up more in the last 3 years when inflation was lower than the prior 6 years in this last boom. And so it's been this like fake growth. We needed a correction 3 years ago. And COVID and lack of supply and very low rates just propped up the market. So the housing market in Charlotte's gonna start slowing for sure. I mean, I've already seen it, like we saw it last year with condos, we saw it towards the end of the year, close into the city. We start seeing more picky buyers. It really is, God bless you, it's really on a community level, guys, where if you see a community with 2 homes, here's how you'll know. First of all, you can look at Toronto, Vancouver, New York City, and the Bay Area. But secondly, if you look in any community and there's more than 1 home on the market, watch what happens. Because what's happening is there's no homes in the market, and then someone goes in the market, it comes off. But that home doesn't come off the market fast. I mean, like in the first week. As soon as the home hits a market, what happens? All the neighbors want to know what happens, so they know what to do. And if that home doesn't go on the contract fast, you're thinking, well, no one else will go on the market. No, the opposite happens. Again, like Warren Buffett's really smart. A lot of us, I'm gonna put you guys in this category, a lot of us, it's easy to just be like, well, I mean, they're selling, you know, I need to sell. Well, but they're not moving, so shouldn't we wait? Well, no, we need to sell. We need to go under them because if they go down, they're only worth what the lowest price in your neighborhood is. So when you watch Toronto and Vancouver and you watch California, New York start going down, which is already happening, and when you watch a community have 2 homes on the market, which some are happening, condos and townhomes are seeing that, some single family home communities are starting to see that. When you watch buyers that you're talking with make excuses when there's options, because now there's 2 homes, not 1. When there's 1, they jump. When there's 2, they want to wait. And they start attaching it to, well, it doesn't have this or it doesn't have that. Now they're scared. Now they have fear. And now something has to give. Well, we can't lower rates because they're already too low, right? And we can't lower the rate for credit cards and borrowing because it's already so low. And inflation already was so high. So even if inflation comes back down, there's not much more the government can do outside of what they did last time if buyers stop wanting to buy. Now that's not happened yet, but it's starting to. It's starting to happen in other parts of the country in North America, and it's starting to happen here at the really high price points where buyers are starting to get a little bit pickier. As soon as one variable moves, either the stock market comes down, inflation doesn't come down, a community gets two options. As soon as any of those things happen, and the inflation could come down on consumer price index, you see CPI, that's not producer price index, guys, it's both sides of it. You know, it's one thing if the consumer doesn't feel it, but like the producer may. Like there's a lot of moving parts here. And as soon as one variable moves, as soon as it's less expensive to build again, you're thinking buyers are gonna buy. No, they're gonna wait. All these buyers that are waiting for something to hit the market, I said this earlier, guys, they're telling you that because it's a great story to share with no accountability. They don't have to do anything. How many people in the last year, Teresa, have told you they want to refinance and then never got you paperwork?
Every day.
Every day, right? So remember that, guys. Just because someone tells you they're going to do something, it's easy to say, hey, honey, would you like me to make dinner tonight? Well, I'm out of town. Oh, I mean, I wish you were in town. I'd love to do it. You know, hey, you want to go to the Panther game tomorrow night? I mean, they're not playing. You want to go to the Hornets game tomorrow night? Oh, I can't. Oh, maybe if I would have given you more notice. It's easy to say something when you know the results, right? Like he's not available because you already said there's something else going on, and it's like tomorrow night. So all these buyers are telling you they're ready for market. So you're thinking like, well, if supply picks up, you got tons of buyers. No. They think that they're going to buy when supply picks up. But I tell my wife all the time, I'm glad that you haven't met someone better because you got to meet, it was what, 3 billion men in the world? Holy cow, she wouldn't come home to me. I'm just glad that I snatched her up before she could find something better, right? I mean, you know, Scott probably says that every day, Teresa, when he goes to lunch. So buyers that are buying right now are buying an emotion. And the buyers 6 months from now that don't buy are gonna not buy an emotion. They're buying right now because there's no options, and they'll freeze because there's no options. See, when there's options, what happens is fear kicks in. They're like, well, did I buy the wrong home? What if I buy this home doesn't go down in price, doesn't go in the contract, it's gonna go down in price. What if I wait and they both go down in price? Fear of the unknown freezes people or makes them flee. They flee back to their known, which is their house, or makes them freeze and not do anything. Does it make sense? You're actually seeing an abnormally crazy high peak of a roller coaster that has to come back down. And it's gonna seem slow and quiet, but you're gonna have a client and you're gonna be the listing agent, you're all excited about a listing, and you're gonna put it on the market and it's gonna be flawless. And right before you go in the contract, a neighbor's gonna go on the market and your house won't go in the contract. Or it won't be flawless and you don't even need another option. When a buyer is not willing to move forward, when the home has an issue, now they're thinking logically. And once buyers start thinking logically, this market changes. And they're gonna think logically when they don't have extra disposable income because inflation went too high. And they're gonna think logically when their nest egg of stock market went down 20% overnight, which is what happened a year and a half ago, guys. It's gonna happen again. And so when all these variables are all in the air, it's kind of like if you have a big china cabinet, you have to move it all to your kitchen cabinets. I'll give you a better example that everyone can relate to, I'm sure. Who actually makes 3 trips from the van to the house, kitchen with the groceries, versus spending 20 minutes cutting off the circulation, putting all the plastic bags up and down all their arms, and then one thing spills out and you curse and everything falls out and you yell at your kid and the cat runs out, the dog runs out, and you spend the next 20 minutes and you got the spilled, broken spaghetti sauce jar, and you're like, I could have just made 2-3 trips. People don't act on logic, guys. People don't move on logic, they don't make decisions on logic. And what's happening right now is everyone wants what they can't have. Once they can have it, they don't want it anymore. You know, that's what's gonna happen. And once they feel like they can't have it, because everything else is so expensive, well, I'm worried I can't afford that vacation. I'm worried I can't afford college. I'm worried I can't afford the grocery bill. Guys, I've heard people say the grocery bill is almost doubled. So unless you have a client who just puts everything on credit, so here's the thing, you can challenge me and be like, people don't focus on their budget that much. Okay, well then, I should stop talking right now. like if they are so out of touch with their budget, that everything's on credit, Well, what happens when they raise credit rates? What happens when the credit card companies drop their balance and it hits their ceiling? See where I'm going with this? There's an objection handler to everything when it comes to the economy right now, guys. If you dig in, if you spend the time we just spent, and holy, it's 11:26, like perfect, I'm gonna land this plane. If you spent the next hour and a half unpacking everything we just talked about the last hour and a half, you would have dozens of people that you care for, family members, friends, neighbors, clients, that if you just ask them questions, what do you think the stock market does to the housing market? What do you think happens to the value of homes when 2 more homes in the market in the community hit the market at the same time? What do you think is gonna happen if inflation stays up? What's gonna happen if it comes back down? It's gonna come down, but it's gonna stay high. No one's seen inflation this high. It's been 40 years. What's gonna happen when people stop moving to Charlotte? Well, everyone's moving to Charlotte. Well, where are they coming from? They're coming from other parts of the country. Well, no one's moving there. What if that stops happening? Well, there's investors. China's buying there, London's buying there, Spain's buying there, Brazil's buying there. That's great. They're buying there when it's a good deal. They're not buying there when it's a bad deal. Well, rates are low. Well, they're not as low as they were 2 weeks ago. Everything is changing in real time behind the scenes, and the media just hasn't picked it up yet. And once the media picks it up, then it's obvious. Then everyone goes into fear mode, and then everything changes on a dime. And so we have to just get ahead of that. So I hope this is helpful. I just threw a lot at you. Again, just a recap going backwards in the next 2 minutes. Yes, Charlotte is one of the more popular housing markets in the country. But just like I hope that I'm a good dad for my boys, I'm not perfect. Okay? Just like I hope I'm a good husband for my wife, I'm not perfect. And so you can't live in absolute land where everyone's moving to Charlotte. Newsflash, guys, not everyone's moving to Charlotte. Second of all, first of all, they're not moving to Charlotte, they're moving to Raleigh, they're moving to Atlanta, they're moving to Dallas, they're moving to Fort Worth, they're moving to Seattle, they're moving to Midland, they're moving to Austin, they're moving to Albuquerque. They're moving to other places. Second of all, if someone actually unpacks what you just said, they're like, well, if everyone's moving to Charlotte, who's moving to New York to buy that house they just sold? Okay? Inflation in a short term is a very good thing for the economy because it means the economy can handle it. But what happens is there was a human, a male or a female, who made that decision to raise this price and raise that price. And human decision is usually attached to human error. And so when you think this is all just happening by really smart people make mistakes. No one's perfect. And so inflation goes up when the economy can handle it. And then it goes too high and the economy can't handle it. The stock market has never been higher. The stock market cannot go up forever, especially now that inflation's going up. This is probably going to be what pushes down the stock market. The stock market went down a couple times last March. That was the lowest 2 drops in the history. It was like the Great Depression times 2. It has to happen again. I'm not saying it's going to be that dire, but it has to go down. It has to go down. Inflation can't stay where it is, but it can't go back down to stagflation or deflation. So inflation goes up, companies make less money, or buyers buy less, which means companies make less money. And if companies make less money, earnings go down. If earnings go down, stock prices go down. If stock prices go down, people have less net worth. If people have less net worth, they don't buy houses. What else do you want to talk about? So honestly, guys, like if you have someone who wants to sell in the next 5 years, they do it today. And when I say that, I mean if tomorrow another house is to the market, you can't go on the market unless you want to underprice it. You better hope I'm wrong and that house goes on the contract fast. And when the house goes on the contract fast, then you can go above it. Just get the house ready. And again, like I'm not Nostradamus, like I'm definitely not God. I don't know everything. I'm just looking at variables that you guys can look at just with me. The housing market will go down. So if you Google San Francisco, New York, and Vancouver, and Toronto, like I said, if they're going down, which they're starting to, that means there's less buyers for us, guys, because they can't sell for what they thought they could, and they need to find buyers for their house. It's taking them longer to find buyers for their house because everyone's moving to Charlotte. And so here's the thing: if you want to go with that story, that everyone's moving to Charlotte, it's great. That's why they're building apartments, because there's more demand for rents right now than there is for buying. See where I'm going with this, guys? If you really take, and I really appreciate the commitment you guys took for the last hour and a half, but if you really take the time to dig into what's going on nationally, across North America, and even globally, I mean, the United States has like no exports. You know, like our unemployment rate is at all-time low. Everything is at either highs or lows, right? Something has to give on all of this. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad. You know, like I go in the ocean with my boys. It's awesome until we go too far and they can't swim. Like it can't go on forever. Like 1 glass of wine tastes good, 3 is dangerous, right? Even 2. You see where I'm going with this? Like the ride has to end. It is. The ride has to end. Does that make sense? We saw it last year, guys. The housing market didn't show it as much. The condo market showed it.
We started seeing some drops in prices. We saw some price improvements. You're seeing it. You're seeing it. Don't think about that one listing you have that sold overnight with 14 offers. Stretch it out to different price points in Charlotte. The higher price points are sticking on the market longer. Other neighbors are starting to go on the market. The higher price points, neighbors can be like, I can just go on the market for whatever I want. And they control the market. But again, look at other parts of the country. We have to get outside of our bubbles, look at everything. And look at how high everything is, how expensive everything is. And think about how that impacts stock market. Think about how that stock market impacts savings. And here's the thing, if the yield curve keeps going up and people actually have an incentive to save, they put money out of the stock market. You can just keep digging into this, guys. Once you focus on the stock market, you cannot see the housing market. Once you focus on the housing market in other parts of the country where they're coming from, you start asking yourself, where are those people finding buyers? Once you start wondering where those buyers are coming from, you start wondering what the ceiling is that they're willing to pay there and for those sellers to sell and move here. Charlotte is so popular because it's so underpriced. Are we still underpriced?
No, we're starting to see.
I mean, I'm meeting people. We just listed this big home, and I've met some of the brokers, and they're like, yeah, my buyer's from Chicago, my buyer's from San Francisco, my buyer's from here, my buyer's from there. It's kind of expensive in Charlotte. Guys, newsflash, I love Charlotte as much as the next people. I moved from New York City to DC, from DC to Charlotte. I love it here. I'm not moving anytime soon. I love the mountains, I love the beaches, and also like for me, like I'm not from the South, so I had like a lot of like mad people up north, you know, between New York City and the politics in DC. So I just love the Southern hospitality and everything. But guys, we're not banking. That's New York City, it's even San Francisco. We're not tourism, that's New York City, it's even Chicago, that's Florida. We're not technology, that's Texas, that's San Francisco, you know, that's Northern California. We have a very diverse workforce. We have no one workforce, I'm landing the plane. We have no one workforce that's over 12%, but we don't have 300,000-hour jobs like those big cities have. We don't have production and film like even Wilmington and Atlanta have on the East Coast. You see where I'm going with this? What people love about Charlotte, about how it's quaint and it welcomes you in. When I moved here in 2005, I had no idea that we'd be here today because I knew nothing about real estate. I knew nothing about anyone in Charlotte. I had no friends. But Charlotte will welcome you. People don't move to Charlotte because they want New York City. They don't move to Charlotte because they want San Francisco. They don't want Chicago. They don't want any major city. We're number 15 in the country now. That's crazy. How high can we get? We're Charlotte. We're an awesome city for who we are, and not because we're going to have prices like those other cities, because we don't have $500,000 salaries, guys. We can't compete with the number of jobs that are paying that much. DC doesn't have the high-paying jobs, but they have unlimited federal government jobs. See where I'm going with this? Every market that you see people moving here, some of them are starting to pause. And they're like, what's Charlotte have? Because you're just as expensive or you're getting close. Everything has to get, I just threw a lot of variables at. Hope you guys took something away. Hopefully more than one thing. Was this helpful?
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
I appreciate you guys going. 11:30 in the dock, guys. That's good. Does anyone have any questions while we're together?
One of the things that I've seen and that I've followed for the last 7 years is if you look at the trends of like where housing prices nationally have gone from the 80s up until now. We're just now getting to where we're supposed to be from the crash. So everybody became solvent around 13.
Right.
That's where everybody was, at least not underwater. But we're just now, especially with our average, sale price, our median sale price here in Charlotte and nationally, we're just now getting to that. So the question are we looking at another drop, or now that we've hit the ceiling, are we going to plateau? Will it drop a little? Will it drop a significant amount? So
Yeah.
those are the kinds of things that I'm trying to watch and forecast going forward. I mean, the other things that you were talking about is, interest rates hitting 3.5% to 4%. That would sweep out a lot of the first-time home buyers dropping demand. Home builders were caught with their pants around their ankles in 2008, 9, 10. They had all of this inventory, no way to unload it. And so they didn't build over the last 10 years. And of course, now building has ramped up. So it's those three things that are the combination of where are we going.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at Toronto or Vancouver or New York or the Bay Area to kind of forecast what that looks like. But I've been watching those things nationally to see how are we going to get there. Because we had no construction workers 10 years ago, you know, and now we can't get enough of them again. And of course, the materials are going up. So those are the forecasting things that are kind of, I don't have a clear vision of.
Yeah, so I can answer those real fast for you if you want. The first one about how Charlotte's just now like back to like the equivalent price. That's I've heard the same thing, but that is a scary statement to follow, because that's like ignoring the law of diminishing returns, where, you know, like my son is starving, my boys, and so they're like, I can eat a whole pizza. So they eat the first slice in a minute. Then they eat the second slice in 3 minutes. They eat the third slice in 10 minutes, and then they're done. And so you saw a ramp up because of no supply. You saw a ramp up because of lower prices. You know, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. Is everyone moving here because Charlotte's on the price, or is everyone moving here because everyone wants to move here? The Charlotte's on the price part has gone away.
Yeah.
And so we're going to lose a little bit of the, let's move to Charlotte because you get so much more bang for your buck.
Yeah.
And so then on the other side, even if Charlotte should keep going up because it's such a popular area, the two other points you made is, one is they have to first get out of where they are. So like, yeah, it's great that Charlotte is reasonably priced versus the Bay Area, but they have to convince someone in the Bay Area to pay $3 million for a 1,700 square foot bungalow, right, that needs work. And so we're only as strong as the weakest link in the country. That's why I say to look at other parts of the country, look at other variables, because what makes Charlotte, and I love it here, I've been here for 17 years, what makes Charlotte so charming and popular is that it's not these other major markets. But what also makes it so popular and charming, it's almost like when Isle Palms got too expensive, people just stopped. They looked at other beaches. That's where Edisto Beach got so popular. And same with all the Carolina beaches. No one looked at Carolina Beach or Oak Island or Emerald Island. No one looked at Curie. No one looked at that until Wrightsville was just exorbitant and Southport was just exorbitant. And so they were only as strong as the weakest link, and they benefited. So if the other beaches that are more popular, if Charleston just dropped in price, Isle Palms drops, Folly Beach goes away.
Yeah.
Edisto goes away,
Yeah.
right? They're always, and so people have moved, a lot of people have moved to Charlotte. I mean, it just is what it is. A lot of people move to Charlotte because they're like, I get so much more bang for my buck. And a lot of people, Charlotte's amazing. It's always going to be one of the best places to live. Like, I want to live here. But it's that combination of it's no longer reasonable.
Yeah.
The salaries don't commensurate with the values. People don't get amnesia about, like, I just sold my home in Chicago, I made 180, and now I'm making 130. Still really good income, but now the home price is the same. Maybe I'm getting a little more for my house, more upgrades, but the home isn't any cheaper. So until there's more supply, I actually think that demand is going to start cooling, because people are either sick of waiting, or a lot of the people is just like, well, I just want to be there. But then they start thinking about it, like, it doesn't make sense. Charlotte's as expensive as Chicago, and I make less money in Charlotte, and I can live anywhere. And so I think we're going to have a few years of the lull. Like, it's going to start slowing a little bit. Like, no, this year is going to come and go, and everyone's going to have a good year, right? No one's going to think like the market crashed in Charlotte, but you're definitely going to hear it in other cities. And that just means that next year's going to be more obvious. But you are going to start seeing a few of these listings, especially the big price points and the homes that have flaws. The steep driveway, needs work, power lines, highway, whatever it is. People are just going to pause a little bit. They're like, well, I'm not paying a premium for that. And then when rates go up, that causes a little bit of a slowdown. The great thing is rates are so low, right? So what has to happen is prices have to start coming down before rates go up more.
Well, think about your first home. I mean, my first home was $100,000, and kids now that are trying to buy their first home, and it's $300,000.
Oh, and you mentioned kids. One thing I didn't tell you guys. One thing I didn't tell you guys on the nation is that there is the largest population is baby boomers, but millennials are right behind them. And so this decade, the largest population will be millennials. And the largest percentage of those millennials will be between 35 and 44 years old, which is prime buying years. 72.1% of all millennials will be between 35 and 44 this decade. And so that's going to create a lot of buying, and a lot of media is going to talk about how everyone wants a home, millennials don't want a home. but a lot of millennials are renting in Charlotte and buying in Austin. They're renting here to figure out where they want to be, and they're buying where they want to live. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They're renting here for their first job, and then they're getting their dream job in Silicon Valley, or the West, or the South.
Yeah.
And so like now it's like one of those things, like I gotta look in the mirror first, like what are your flaws, Dave? Like what can I work on? Like I work on my flaws every day, like work on your strengths, work on your flaws, right? Like try to minimize these and maximize these. You gotta know that about your market too. Every market has its strengths and weaknesses, and one of our strengths is that we are affordable. And the National Affordability Index, to your point, it's not where it was. It's not as bad as it was. It's actually more affordable today because rates are so low.
Yeah.
It's actually more affordable today because inflation has not been going through the roof on other things. So that's to your point. Affordability today is still better, guys, to buy a house than it was in 2009. But inflation removes affordability overnight. And it doesn't matter how much you want that beach house. It doesn't matter how much you want that condo in Uptown. It doesn't matter how much you want that dream home in South Park. Like, if you have no extra dollars, you're just not moving. Or you're taking the higher salary in a bigger market. And so there's a lot of moving parts. There's no guarantees. And the best thing to just say is, like, for your own family and for your friends and loved ones, is just ask the question, you know, like, where are you going to be when you grow up? Like 5 years from now. If you're not going to be in this home, then get out now. Even if you have to rent. Like, buy if you can borrow. If you have cash, don't buy. If you're going to get a loan, then borrow. Like, definitely borrow, because so fix that rate. Because when inflation goes up, I just refinance, I fix the payment that I can keep until I pay off the house, and prices just go up. I don't mean housing prices, I mean bread and milk and utilities. The one constant is I don't have to worry about my home price going up.
Yeah.
It's one of the great things about owning a home is that even before you pay it off, you can fix your payment, and you don't have to worry about the rent rates going up, which they are in Charlotte.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of moving targets, but I imagine the market's gonna slow this year, because it showed signs last year.
Yeah.
And like when the country started opening up in the middle of the year, you saw the condos in the market because they wanted to get out, because they didn't want to be in condos, but there's no buyers, right? And so supply picked up and the prices plummeted. You start seeing that in some of the flawed homes, but then the country's kind of slowed back down again, and no one's single-family homes hit the market. But there's a lot of single-family homes that need to hit the market, and the stock market needs to come down. And inflation impacts the stock market, which impacts the real estate market.
We're also seeing tastes change. I mean, the 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, everybody's like, oh, I'm willing to do work. I've watched HGTV, I can do all of that. And now it needs to have nothing wrong with it.
Right.
I mean, it has to be pristine.
That's until and when you have options, it gets even worse, right? Yeah, like if they're being picky now, that's my point. Thank you for saying that. You hear that? If someone's being picky, that's not good. That means that they're acting on logic, which is what they should do, but no one ever does. And as soon as people start acting on logic, it's because, like, okay, the party, you know, the music shut off, like the party's over. They're acting on logic now. Logic means that we're overpriced. If you want to borrow, yeah, rates have never been lower. Do it sooner rather than later. But if you're buying just because you think, like, it's a great price, that's not the case. You know, like, buy because it's America's dream of home ownership. I'm always going to believe in owning a home. I'm just telling you guys that there's too many signs that the market has to slow. It has to dissipate. It's not going to stop. It's not going to crash. There's just too many signs, too many variables are all pointing towards. It started last year, didn't move too much, but inflation happened last year and rates happened last year, and now it's going to keep going. Inflation should come back down some, but again, it'll level out like 3.5%, and that's too high. Historically, it has to be 2%.
What was it, Lawrence Yoon and several of them said that we were expecting to see it at the end of 19, beginning of 20, and then COVID hit,
backed everything up.
and then it,
Yeah,
and
COVID
it froze everything.
Yeah, COVID backed everything up. Well, guys, I want to be respectful of time. Thank you for those.
Sorry.
Anyway, that was awesome. I hope you guys all got some value, and guys, our clients need us. Like, I don't want you to think you're in a sales position, because your clients need you. It saves marriages, saves lives. Like, it really is that important as marketplace ambassadors. So I really appreciate you guys all giving up so much time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.